Hi everyone, Matthew here again with Flashbulb Memories Photo Booth in Arizona. This is the second video in the series of using Tave and webhooks to automate your data, and more specifically, this is going to apply towards employee scheduling or calendar schedules in general, and how to get data from Tave into your calendars in a more meaningful way. So first video we covered how to actually set up webhooks in Tave using Zapier so that we could send the data to Zapier and have that raw data, everything from custom fields, job start times, client names, etc., ready to use to put into another app. So this video is going to cover, now that that data is in the webhook in Zapier, how to get it into a Google Sheet, format it, and basically manipulate that data further. And then from there, we'll cover in the next video getting that into a Google Calendar and syncing things and making sure everything is automatic. So to start, we're in Tave here. Just to confirm, we have the webhook set up. This is under our automation. This automation is based on the job being booked is when it'll actually execute and push that data. And I'm just going to edit this webhook so you can see what I have set up currently. Now there is a current glitch in Tave when you go to edit a webhook that I was made aware of. If you click edit, it will automatically append the last token that you used to that webhook. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And likewise, if you're editing yours, just double check that and do the same. But as you can see here, this is my entire webhook that's going to Zapier. It has a lot of data regarding the job, the start time, the end time, the location, a bunch of custom features that they may or may not have chosen based on their package, etc. So that's set up. I'm just going to cancel out of this. And I'm just going to go back to the main automations to show you once more as well. I have multiple automations set to push those webhooks a day before the job, when the job is booked, a month before the job, 3 months before the job, 7 days before the job, and then again an instant one whenever a task is updated, so that I can basically push this manually whenever I choose. So with that out of the way, we're going to go into Zapier here. And we're going to create a new Zap. Now I've already got all this set up and I've got all the systems built out, so I'm not going to start from scratch, but I'm going to walk you through my existing tools that are set up. So we have a new Zap, and actually before we go any further here, we're going to want to set up our spreadsheet and make sure we can sign in and get it built the way we want with the necessary headers in place. So let's go over to Google Sheets, sign in with the account that you're going to use, basically permanently, that you want to link to Zapier. So this is our business account here that I'm signed into with our G Suite. And now what you're going to do is create a new, just a blank spreadsheet. And now up here, you can see all of the headers that I have in place. These headers can be whatever you want, doesn't have to match anything. This is how you're going to identify the data later. But if you want a really easy way to set this up, what I recommend you do is go into Tave and just go to your jobs list or your leads list, whatever you want to see. I've actually created a specific filter called For Spreadsheet that I used to use to export the data and manually upload it to Google Sheets. So I'm just going to click on that for the sake of this demo here. And once you're in any of these views, you can essentially click this download button up here and click Download CSV Visible or All Columns. So based on your filter, you can show which columns you want to see here so that you don't get basically a huge data dump of unnecessary info. So I don't use a lot of the data you can see here. So if we just download this, I'm going to do download visible, but again, you can do all until you're sure how this is set up. And if we open that spreadsheet, that CSV that gets downloaded to our computer, let's see where that's going here. You can see I've got all of my headers already in place. So you can basically just select this first row, copy it, go into your Google Sheet, and paste that right there, and you'll be all set, just to save you some extra work from entering all of those manually. So with the headers in place, we're pretty much ready to go. Now I want to call something out here first. You'll notice in this spreadsheet I have a couple extra columns. So the spreadsheet that I just basically would have imported starts with ID. But in Google Sheets here, I have, maybe not a couple extra, but one extra column, which is arrive at storage. So this is essentially my start time of any given event that we book based on the time that's booked and the address of the location. So I'll get into that later, but for now, focus on having ID here, and if your scheduled time needs to be different than the time you see on the calendar, just insert a row or a column here and just leave it blank for now. So with the spreadsheet set up, we can go back into Zapier. And the first thing we're going to do is obviously make sure that we have this catch hook in place. So this was the first thing that we covered in the first video, which is the catch hook to actually process that webhook data. So this should already be in place. If it's not, go back and watch the first video and then come back here. Now the next thing, I mentioned briefly that you can have these actions in Zapier that basically format your data before you spit it out to the given tool or software that you want to use. So I actually have an action here set up, Zapier formatter, and what it's doing is it's performing an HTML markdown on a couple of lines of data. So I have a client notes one, and then I also have another one for internal notes. So these are just two custom fields in Tave that we use. And basically what this will do is it'll take out all of those P tags and BR tags and HTML tags that just mess up the look of things. To give you an idea of what that looks like when it's exported, if you don't add these formatter steps, you can see right over here how messy this gets with all the paragraph tags and everything else. So to add a formatter, you just click the plus button, click format on the side there, choose text, but really you can format this data however you want. For this particular demo, this is going to be text that we're formatting. And when you choose transform, the type is going to be convert HTML to markdown. And then the last thing to do is basically select your input from that catch hook step here. In my case, I had input public or internal notes and client notes. So you can only do one, and then once you choose that one and continue, you can set up an additional formatter for the separate line. So I'm going to delete this since I've already completed that step. Right here, we've got the first formatter, and here's the formatter for another line. And then actually we have this a third time because it looks like we have three areas where it's a block text, and so that can mess up when it goes into Google Sheets what it looks like. The next step is to create this find or create row in Google Sheets action. So to do this, you'll just click the plus button for a new action. You'll choose Google Sheets. It'll look just like this. You're going to have to select your account and sign in if this is the first time you've done this. Once you're signed in, you can choose the existing sheet and future automations. And the action event you're going to choose is lookup spreadsheet row down here at the bottom. So this is a search event that's first going to search your spreadsheet for an existing row, and if it doesn't find it, it will create it. But if it does find it, the next action we're going to set up is to update it. And this will basically make it so that it can be automatic and it won't duplicate your data or miss things that need to be updated. So with that action in place, we're going to click choose account. Sorry, this is where we choose the account if you haven't already set that up, and set up action. So this is where we get into the detail of what's actually happening here. So this setup action, it's going to confirm the spreadsheet you have, the worksheet within that spreadsheet you're going to choose. You're going to make your lookup column here the ID. So if you just click the drop down, it's column B currently. If you've been following along, it's also going to be column B for you, but just find whatever column is ID, or essentially the job ID in Tave that you want to filter by, whatever you've named that, and select it. For the lookup value, we're going to click in here and you're going to choose the job ID. So same thing, we're using the column ID here in the spreadsheet, but the job ID is from step 1 in that catch hook. So that's going to basically look up that job ID from the source via that webhook, and it's going to compare it to the column ID in Google Sheets here to make a decision. You can skip the rest of these here until we get down to the fields within the Google Sheet. So you can see these are the fields that match exactly what I have up here at the top in the headers. Arrive at storage, ID, attendant lead, attendant email, arrive at storage, ID, attendant lead, attendant email. So basically all you're doing here is filling out whatever data you want to fill in the spreadsheet with the source data from the webhook. So as an example again, I've got job date here from step 1. I can select my job date. You can also search for it if you can't find it easily enough. Click on that, it'll populate the job date. Primary session start time, I just choose that for my webhook, and so on and so forth. So once you have all of this filled out, or if you're missing anything, then it means that you didn't set up the webhook in step 1 to collect everything. Or you didn't set up in Tave the actual webhook from our first video to collect everything that you want to spit out. So go back and watch that first video if you're missing anything here, but otherwise you should be all set. We're going to scroll to the bottom, and the last thing we're going to do is make sure to check this box that says create Google Sheets spreadsheet row if it doesn't exist. So once you do that, you can test the action, and it should give you a success. Basically, when you go into that spreadsheet, you should have a new row, assuming that it's already empty to begin with. Now, if you don't have a new row in here, it means that this zap that you just created didn't find a webhook to trigger and send it over. So what you need to do is go into Tave, go into your automations, and make sure you have an automation that will trigger this for testing. So as I mentioned, I have this task complete automation, which basically when I mark a task complete, it will trigger that webhook. If you don't have this, I recommend you set it up. You basically just add that automation, choose observing task completed, execute immediately, and then add that same webhook you created before. So now if you go into one of your jobs and you go into your tasks and you just add a new task, call it test, and you check that box, this will now push, and when you go back into Zapier, you'll be able to actually test out, re-grab that sample data essentially, and you should then see the new spreadsheet row here. Now the next thing you're going to do is we're going to add another action, and it's going to be a Google Sheets action again. Now the event is going to be update spreadsheet row from this drop down here near the top. So this is going to basically, if it didn't find a row, or if it didn't create a row to begin with, it's going to find your existing one and just update it. So it's going to feel a little redundant, but we'll continue through these steps. And now up here, you're going to make sure, obviously the spreadsheet and the worksheet are the same. And now for this part here where it says row, what you need to do is click into this row, make sure you select the Google Sheet step that you just created, which is find or create row in Google Sheets. And then from this option list, you're going to choose the row. So again, it should be alphabetical here. Let's see if we can get to row. If not, let me just search for row. Perfect, here we go. So I've already got it selected. Your row is probably going to show 1 or 2. If your table's empty, mine shows 10 because that's just the sample that I used. But make sure you click on a row and that there's nothing else in here except for that row Google Sheet identifier. Now we're going to scroll down and basically fill this out the exact same way as that previous step. You're going to choose the data from the catch hook. Make sure you select the catch hook as the source, not the Google Sheet row. And you're going to fill it out until you're at the bottom here and you've got everything that you want. So again, a bit redundant because we are duplicating the step that we just did in order to update it with the same data that we initially pushed to create it. Now once that's done, again, you can test the action and this should find the event and update it. You probably won't see any difference unless you go back into Tave and change something, but we'll get there in just a moment during this test. So if everything is successful, you can turn this zap on. Of course, you should make sure the tests line up, but we'll just turn it on here since I know these are set up properly. And now I'll go ahead and show you this in demo. So on our Google Sheet, I've already got most of my data, if not all of my data, out of Tave. So yours is obviously going to be a bit more empty, but to show you that this is working, I'm going to update an existing event, and you'll be able to see it update here. So right here, I've got on row 17, we have an event, it looks like on the 2nd of April. So April 2nd, and this is a perfect example because I have all this weird formatting here from the HTML that when it goes on a calendar invite, it just looks really ugly and it's bulky, so we want to change that. So I'm going to go into Tave, and I'm going to go to my April 2nd event. Let's see if we can get there faster. There we go. And if you remember, I have an automation set up that basically, if I edit a task, if I complete a task, it will push that webhook data automatically. So since this is still a little ways out, it's not going to update it in, we're not going to wait for the 7-day mark or the month mark, etc. I'm just going to add a new task. Doesn't matter what it is, it can be an existing task, and just check it off. So now if this worked properly and we had the first video completed properly, then this webhook should have pushed, Zapier should have run its automation, and in Google Sheets we should see the update, and all that HTML formatting should be gone, not to mention any other changes to the custom fields or the schedule, start and end time should all be updated now based on what was in Tave. So let's have a look. There we go. So it looks like our text is all cleaned up. Looks much better. We don't have all this weird HTML formatting, and you can't see here, but if there were any changes, it's been updated. So actually, let's add a change. So right here under Beauty Dish, we don't currently have that filled out. I'm just going to go back into their job, and I'm going to edit that custom fields list, and I'm going to say, let's say we did want to have a Beauty Dish for this, and we'll save it. Once again, I'm going to go into the tasks, and I'm just going to create a test task here and mark it done. So if that worked, we should now see in that Google Sheet a Beauty Dish marked yes. And there it is, just like that. You can see it happens instantly, super fast. Basically, can't get any better than that in terms of immediate response from what you're doing. So now the last part of this video is going to cover this special formula here in column 1. So essentially, as I mentioned at the start, in our business, we have our photo booth rentals. They require a lot of setup time. There's time difference between our venues. We service all of Arizona and even out of state. So you'll see we've got Tucson and Phoenix. These are about 1.5 hours to 2 hours apart, depending on the actual location of the venue. So what I've done is I've created a custom formula that filters out the venue city, and then it looks at the start time and it subtracts a predetermined number of hours or minutes from that start time to give us our basically shift start time. So for this given event on the 2nd here at 8 p.m., that's when the actual photo booth will be in action until 11 p.m. We want our team to essentially arrive and start packing the equipment at 5:15 p.m. Now the reason for that is because the venue city is in Tucson, which is where the team is located here. And we just base our arrival on what we know in terms of travel for most of Tucson, maybe 35-40 minutes of travel, and then the amount of time it takes once you're at a venue to actually unload, unpack the equipment, set up, prepare everything, and then also build in a little wiggle room in terms of making sure everything goes well and you don't run into any issues or traffic, etc. So based on that, I've made this start time here to be 5:15 p.m., which gives us 2 hours and 45 minutes of room to work in. With that, we're generally set up 30 minutes before the event, sometimes 45, and everything goes smoothly. So the formula for this, it's a bit much, but bear with me here. We're going to do equals if s. We're going to have this ISNUMBER, and then a search. And what this is doing is it's going to reference 017, which is our actual venue address column that gets filled out in Tave, in that search box for your actual location. And then it has this right here, which is essentially tagging the city. And then from there, it's applying a formula that I've given for that particular city. So in the case of Tucson, we'll go here to Tucson. It's taking H17, which is our actual primary session event start time in Tave, and it's subtracting, and you can see here, this is the way the formula has to be in order for it to process that time, right? It's subtracting 2.75 or 2 hours and 45 minutes from that start time. Now, I could delete all of this and just have the Tucson one there, and it would work. The reason I have all of these is because it's comparing that venue address to each of these locations. So if it's Tucson, it will do this. If it's Marana, it will do this. If it's Mesa, it will do this. So you can see that the times vary based on what I've predetermined in terms of travel time that the start time needs to be before each event. So I'm gonna just copy this, and I'm gonna share it in the comments below so you don't have to worry about staring at this and copying it one for one. And I'll put one line of it, and then I'll put a few of these so you can see how they're stringed together. But the most important thing is that you're referencing the name in terms of what's in column 017 in my case, which is the primary session address column. and then you're referencing the start time that you've exported in from Tave via that webhook, and then making sure that this little formula here is basically number of hours over 24 hours in a day, which will allow that column A to spit out the proper start time. So if we look at this, again, you can see 5:15 p.m. is what's automatically given. If I change the start time to 6 p.m., it will change with it. So I'm going to change that back just so we don't update our calendar. So that's basically everything in terms of getting that data from Zapier to be useful in other apps. The reason you would do this is, for one, in that case here, how I showed you how to manipulate that data further using special formulas that then I can push this out to Google Calendars. Or if you just want it to be in a spot that you can basically filter or maybe see in one area better, you can then spit this out from Google Sheets to maybe a lot more apps. But in general, having that webhook set up, you'll pretty much be set. This process is usually only necessary if you want to use an integration further, like Google Calendars, with a step in between using something like this with custom formulas. So stay tuned for the next video where we will cover, now that the data is in here, how do we get it into Google Calendars? How do we get those calendar invites working and automated? Thanks.